Hey, this is Christian Buckley with another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm interviewing here this morning Sébastien. Hey, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How's it going?
Yeah, you can't just wave. You have your voice has to come
Yeah,
through for the camera to
yeah,
switch over. You
yeah,
know.
yeah. God. Hey.
So what? Hey, there you are. Hey, why don't you introduce yourself for those that don't know you, where you are, who you are, what you do, all that stuff.
So my name is, I'm going to say it correctly. It's usually I don't do that. My name is Sébastien Levert, which actually means Sebastian. Uh, I am an MVP, Office Dev MVP from Canada. So from beautiful this morning, snowy Montreal. Already had like 15 centimeters of snow since this morning, so pretty good amount. Um, been in the SharePoint space forever. Love to say that I was born in SharePoint. First gig was in SharePoint, never got to escape. I guess something happened and I'm tied to that type of technology. Been MVP for now almost 6 years,
Huh?
and I'm a dev, so I'm a geek. I love to geek out. I love to code. I don't code as much as I used to. I do mostly PowerPoints these days, but it's another type of coding.
To
I
clarify,
guess
yeah, you're not coding for PowerPoint. You're
no, 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 no. I'm
talking
I'm
about
I'm
your code.
using I'm utilizing PowerPoint as
Yeah.
my coding tool.
Yeah.
No, so I lead a product company. So I work for a company called Valo Intranet where we build digital workplace solutions, and I'm their product lead. So I lead the entire product suite that we have that sits on top of Microsoft 365. So that's what I
And you
do.
guys are, I would say that, look, I don't know, I'm not watching the space as closely, the whole intranet in a box type. I don't know if you even like that monikers
Well,
there,
it's
but,
it's 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 part of the game.
but I would say that, I mean, from outward appearances, I think Valo is probably the largest now in the space.
I
And
think
you guys have had a ton of success.
yeah, we've had a huge growth in the last 3 years, like massive growth. From when I joined the team, I think we're like 12, like a
Wow.
really small team, and it's been 3 years now, and now we're like over 65 across the world from basically all time zones. You're getting really good at time zone management when you're working in a global team like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, from a team we have grown a lot, but also from a product perspective, I think we're really grateful of our success, and we're trying to keep that on and to make sure that we have huge success also in the future.
You know, it's interesting. I was, of course, interviewing Sam Marshall with
Yeah.
Clearbox Consulting, and they do their Intranet in a Box report. And we're talking about this space. And I don't know if you saw that interview, but I shared the back when Jeff Teeper was getting back into the SharePoint space, and he met with a bunch of us from the community and wanted to get our thoughts out what's missing in SharePoint. And he talked about at that point that so much of the focus on making SharePoint more beautiful and you know, and adding functionality and integration, all that kind of stuff. But I asked him, I said about his thoughts on the intranet in a box space. And he said, with what we're coming out with, I really see this space just kind of dwindling and going away. There won't be a need for it. And it's funny, I interviewed him a couple years later. So that was like, what, 4 years ago, I think,
Yeah, probably.
4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I interviewed him a couple years later, and this is expanded and exploded.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this to him again just like a couple months ago, again reflecting on the continued growth. And he said, yeah, it really caught them by surprise that it's remained such a big space. I mean, what do you attribute that to? Because SharePoint certainly has improved.
Yeah, but I think it has improved for the smaller customers, making it easy to use as a small organization or small to medium. What we see is the total opposite on the huge organization space where they require much more than what is inside SharePoint Online today. And this is because they they need those new functionalities to really support their own business. And that's the part that is might be missing. And that's the part I think that might be left out by Microsoft on purpose. They don't want to go into like the every single business requirements that every single business has. They want to build a foundation of an intranet. And that's how we see it. We don't see us competing against Microsoft, we see us augmenting the current capabilities.
Sure.
Back 5 years ago, intranet-in-a-box were competing against Microsoft. Microsoft had no real offering. They were using the stack, or they were actually leveraging the investment that customers already made on SharePoint, and they just add everything in there, especially in the publishing side of things, where there was no intranet out of the box in SharePoint. You had to build it all yourself.
Right.
But today, yes, we see customers coming at us saying, hey, we already have that communication site or a couple of communication sites and hub sites, and here's how we managed to make it happen. But you know what? We might want to push that to the next level. And this is where Valo comes into play. So we're happy to see.
Microsoft, that's been the kind of their model, though, is to go and build that foundation. I mean, they've been, now look, you can go and argue the fact that Microsoft will compete with its own ecosystem at different times. And look, any technology company has to constantly innovate. And sometimes that means that you're going to go and look at what's being successful. I think Microsoft's perspective is, what is going to sell net new licenses of Office 365, Microsoft 365. And so sometimes it just makes sense to go and duplicate capability that exists in the partner community, or acquire a company that's done that successfully from the community. But I don't look at that as competing so much as just a necessary part of innovation.
And for me, as a product lead, if Microsoft is taking on something that would cost me resources and efforts to build and maintain and sustain, I'm happy to give that back to Microsoft. Okay, take that part, because now I don't need to invest in that foundational element. I'm going to go somewhere else, and I'm going to go and innovate on, I don't know, chatbots and proper policies hub, or whatever you want to call. And for me, that's just a way to, okay, we did it. We came to a point where it was pretty good. Microsoft kind of caught up with us. I'm happy to give it back to Microsoft and say, okay, do your stuff. We're going to leverage this. Then afterwards, move on. A good example of that is Valo has been very famous for its multilingual aspect.
Yeah.
It's hard to make multilingual work. And Microsoft is now pushing a first version of their multilingual for communication site. Will that support all our customers? Definitely not. And we know that. But will that answer questions for smaller customers? Yes. So you know what? Instead of offering another option for them, we're going to just integrate Microsoft Multilingual as part of our own offering and have our own bigger or enterprise version of multilingual for bigger customers. So instead of investing for smaller customers on the multilingual and making it easy, we're just going to leverage what Microsoft is doing, and we're going to innovate somewhere else.
Well, that's, I think that's the right strategy too, is that, again, and of course, you're not just thinking about, again, competing with Microsoft in that space. There's, going back to Clearbox Consulting and their report, they're tracking over 80 different players in the space. So there's just a lot for you as a product owner to think about, hey, what do we need to go and provide for our clients?
And that market is really active. And what I like is, even though some of those companies that we compete against are doing stuff differently, that's what I love. It's the fact that everyone has their own take on the digital workplace, a totally other angle that happens. For us, it's all about being as close as possible to Microsoft. We don't want to change the nature of SharePoint. We want to leverage it and to enhance it, but not change the nature of SharePoint. So we've always been like that, and we'll always be like that. That's our way to do it. Some others are totally changing how SharePoint is working, and that's what some customers are looking for. And that's on either side. There's a risk. Are you too close to Microsoft so we don't can see the value, or are you so far away from Microsoft that when Microsoft changes something,
everything breaks,
stuff goes boom? So it's really our take, but it's a really fun space. And this year with the Clearbox report, we've been quite happy about the results, and we're happy to see that there's a lot of demand. So,
well, it's always great when you're on top, and then they come after you. So just watch for that. Hey, well, so with all this going on, I mean, so kind of what are you actively presenting on, talking on? Because I know you're wearing your SharePoint Fest,
yes,
branding there. like you do a lot of events. So kind of what are the topics that you're covering right now?
My topics right now are, I'm kind of switching from a very dev focused sessions to a little bit more on the intranet side of things. And the reason why is I'm spending so much time building our products at Valo that I gained a lot of knowledge around how to utilize this beast, which is SharePoint Online. So a lot of stuff around how to build like your ultimate intranet in an hour. What are the different building blocks that you can leverage that really makes a difference for the organization? So this is one of the sessions that I'm doing. I'm still doing extremely geeky session at the same time. Still doing chatbots in Office 365. So how to connect to the graph and all those different really cool tech. But from a Microsoft perspective, a lot of these techs are kind of siloed and it's hard to connect the dots. So I'm there to kind of connect the dots with my with the people. Lots of questions in those sessions. That brings really a lot of interesting discussions. And the last one usually is around teams. Who doesn't want to know more around teams? And this is how to bring your investments you've already done in SharePoint Online to Microsoft Teams from a dev perspective. So how to build tabs, how to build personal apps using either the SharePoint framework or even looping in some of your Power Apps or your SharePoint pages. And those talks are kind of the ones that I'm currently seeing left and right in those different conferences.
So I do have a question, which I'm sure is out of the blue. You've probably never received this question from any of your audiences. Sorry, I couldn't keep my game face.
I'm scared now.
No, but so you talk about what you do in the day job around building intranets, and of course, leveraging the conversations you're having with customers, how they're deploying that, what they're building out, why they're doing the things, the kinds of questions that they have. Now, I'm sure you're asked all the time is, now where does Teams fit? If I'm going and building out this intranet and it's got a lot of this capability, there's overlap there.
Yep.
How does Teams play with intranets with your clients?
I never heard that question.
I know. That's why it was something that I just want to make sure that it's okay. It's trademarked now. That question to use. It happened here first.
The Buckley's question.
Yeah.
So it's actually, yes, we get asked that a lot, and it's something that we've been thinking a lot lately. Even from the community, I think everyone in the community is still like trying to figure that out. For me, I see them as an amazing way to complete each other. I don't believe that Teams is a corporate communication device. Right now, it's conversational. Everything is conversation. Yes, there's files. Yes, there's tabs. Yes, there's like personal apps or whatever. But in the end, what do you do in Teams? You discuss topics around Teams. That's what you do. And the corporate communications is not, there's no right or good option today. There's the post to multiple channels opportunity now, which is impossible to keep track on, like around the discussions. There's no way of having like a single thread. So it's really not meant for that. And this is where I see the intranet falling into play. This is where I see the intranet still being the corporate communication environment or corporate communication device that can be embedded as part of Microsoft Teams. So that's what we're working on at Valo, to build a fully personalized experience in Teams as part of your left rail in Teams, to have your communication channels where you will be able to engage, to comment, to like, to really bring this into a real digital workplace, but never leave your productivity workspace. And I think I almost see Teams as the new operating system of the future.
Yeah.
Where do I start my day? In Teams. Where do I end up my day? In Teams. And I'm getting more used to editing content in the web. So I actually now edit content directly from within Microsoft Teams. Literally, that's my new browser. So why don't we bring the intranet to this new browser? So I see the communication and the collaboration. Teams is amazing from a collaboration standpoint. So Teams and personal apps and intranet, when they come together, actually deliver or fulfills the full vision of a digital workplace, which Teams alone is not, which the intranet alone is not. When we bring all those together, plus third-party systems, I think you really get to a point where that's exactly spot on.
Well, that's been, I mean, we kind of had a version of this conversation with the SharePoint versus Yammer, you know, and when do we use Yammer? When do we use, you know, the intranet? Let's say intranet, not SharePoint. You know, the SharePoint is within, now it's across the entire stack. And when you're, you know, group enabled, you know, Yammer sites, then when you save a file in Yammer, it's in SharePoint as well. But so this question has been out there. People like, where do I start my day? And I would always answer that, like, well, it depends on your organization. My little company, myself, and I've got part-time employees, we live inside of Teams. It doesn't make sense for us to have an intranet. Most organizations, however, they would say you start your day at, like inside of Microsoft, it was MSW, their intranet. Most organizations, that's where they're going to have the communications, the news, the broadcast messages. I think you were in the room at the MVP Summit, I think 2 years ago, where they announced the expansion of the number of users in a Microsoft team to 5,000 or whatever.
5,000,
Room booed. This is a room of like 200 MVPs. Like for this update, and when they announced that, and they were all excited to announce to the product team, and the room, people were like, no, this is not the use case. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like,
do you know a team of 5,000 people?
Well, so you might have your organization in there, and for those larger enterprises, I mean, they're not going to be satisfied until they can get all 250,000 of their employees in that space. And then again, it's the wrong place for that kind of communication to, in my opinion, to reach those people. But it kind of comes back to that, what is your model for collaboration and communication? You can't just look at, well, here are the limits of the size of a team, of a community within Yammer, and here's what we do in SharePoint, kind of go by those. You need to have that strategy where those things are. And
it's bigger than that. You cannot just say, okay, this is the limit. We need more. Let's find something else. I think it's more around how you can utilize all those tools together to fulfill everything. And that's why even today, I was really happy when they announced like the closer integration of Yammer and Microsoft Teams, because they do serve different purpose.
Yep.
And a good example is at Valo, we're managing our partner network through Yammer. Yep. We could not do that through Microsoft Teams. It's not the purpose of Microsoft Teams today. Maybe it might get there at some point.
Yeah, you can have external guests and things out there, but it's still not the same. And I agree, because that was a use case that I for years have been talking about for Yammer, where in seconds I can go and throw together an external community where I can bring in 10 people from 10 different companies and to collaborate around this community centered on my project, my program that I've developed. And can you do that and invite everybody in as a guest into a team, into that channel? It's like, yeah, and there's a little bit more to manage, and it's a little more noisy around that, but it's again that community of excellence that
exactly
is a Yammer use case.
Exactly. So that's the thing. Now, being a HQ'd in Europe, that brings a lot of challenges today, the way that Yammer is closing the walls of Yammer in Europe. So that brings challenges, but still today, we really believe that the three of them, so SharePoint Online as a presentation layer, collaboration processor almost, Teams as your operating system, and Yammer as your external community management is what really brings everything together. It ties everything together. So yeah, it's a fun place to swim in. There's so many things.
Well, and you know, it's as you know, I mean, people like the guidance to be very prescriptive. They're asking Microsoft, tell us the right way to do this. And Microsoft's answer for the last few years has been, there isn't a right or a wrong way to do it. Here's the capability. In some cases, there's overlap in what can be done between these platforms, these workloads. Figure
And,
out what best fits your organization.
and I don't think it's to Microsoft to dictate when to use what. Mark's and that's what you see. A bunch of different product teams at Microsoft are doing a bunch of different things that sometimes feel similar, but kind of fulfills different gaps. And you just need to take whatever you want, make them work together, integrate those technologies. Don't build those technologies. Integrate them and match them to your needs. And that's it. This week, with everything around that Outlook Spaces or whatever is it called. I don't know if you've seen that on Twitter, kind of a leak went out. A bunch of people that started using it, hacked their browser to support that new Outlook Spaces. And like, well, that's someone said, and that was actually very fair. Is that the new OneNote? Like, I don't know. It's a new usage of, so it's really interesting how multiple scenarios and multiple requirements can be fulfilled by now a plethora of technology.
Well, and something that is different from Microsoft 10 years ago is the fact that you have that unifying factor of the Microsoft graph.
Yes, yes.
And that's just something that is so critical, that you can have these different front end user experiences. However, if all that data is written to, captured by the graph, essentially you have it like this massive API where you can access all of that data. So it doesn't matter what happens in the presentation layer on the front end of that. You know that there will be a common way that you can go and get to that data, to that content, to those conversations. Of course, it's not all out there yet and available. There are plenty of requests out to the graph team to expand the API and its capabilities. But there's that piece. I also am a big fan of. I just presented on this, and we'll be talking to this a few times in the coming weeks. But is how they're also bringing tasks together, and it speaks to
Yes.
that same strategy. So no matter where, if you're creating a task or are assigned a task, whether it's in Outlook or in Teams or in Planner or in MS Project or wherever it is, that you'll be able to surface those things through Planner as well as To Do.
Yep.
There will be a common platform for tasks.
I don't know how many times when I used to do consulting, how many times I could ask, can you build me a dashboard of all my tasks?
Yeah.
I've built that 25 times, probably already in different projects. And now, like, was about time that this was done. One of the best, I'm using Outlook on the web exclusively. I don't use Outlook desktop at all.
Oh.
Quite of an exercise. Sometimes I'm missing some of the features, but in general, it's absolutely perfect. And one of the amazing integration that just came out is I can select any text in Outlook on the web, and automatically a small bubble comes up, and I have the task button. So I can make any part of text a task in my to-do. And bringing this as part of your day-to-day productivity, which in that case is Outlook, but could also be fairly easily built directly from within Microsoft Teams, where you could flag messages in Teams as a potential task. This, inside that dashboard of everything, it's your personal work, your teamwork, your corporate work, everything is in a single place. So it's, for me, that's a huge gain, a huge enhancement in productivity that is going to roll out more and more, especially in the task in Microsoft Teams. That will be just off the hook.
Well, I'm excited about it. It's the topic of this month's CollabTalk Tweet Jam. So if you're able to join that, love to add you to that. It's funny because that's how I get found SharePoint. We're really got involved with SharePoint. I had heard about SharePoint, seen it back in the early days, back in 2004.
Oh,
But I did a deployment in 2005 because I was a project and portfolio management platform consultant.
okay.
And was doing a deployment. It was consulting it was an IT consultant for a company here in Utah. It's funny, living in Washington State and living in Utah or commuting to Utah. Did this deployment and did project server and WSS. So an early version, the foundational version of SharePoint.
The good old days.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how. And it's funny. My response was I tried to talk this client out of deploying SharePoint because I just thought it was crap back in the early days. But then I deployed it. They insisted, and I kind of caught the bug. I saw the future vision, and then I joined Microsoft a year later. But it was project management systems. And that kind of got me into the SharePoint space. And so I'm also, it's been a pain for me on the task management. So I'm looking forward to that strategy.
That's going to be cool. Yep. I'll join.
Okay. Well, I'll put you down for it. Well, Sébastien, awesome. I got to run, but folks want to get in touch with you. They want to find out more about you. What are the best ways to reach you and to find you?
Probably on Twitter at Sébastien Levert. On my my website, sebastianlevert.com, and at any conference, mainly the SharePoint Fest, a couple of SharePoint Saturdays, SharePoint conference coming in May. Any of those, I'll be there. Come and talk. Just don't hesitate. Ping me, and I'll be there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the snow. And that lonely pillow up on the
yeah, it's sad. Huh?
The shelf behind you. Yeah, get him some friends up there. It's
gonna happen this weekend. I'm gonna make sure next week I have a better picture for you.
All right. Cool. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
Perfect. Cheers.